Hello and welcome to the Bookworm Bindery with Cathy-Lynn. Today we are going to be looking at the more mundane side of journal or bookmaking. I'm not in the center of a process right now of project, I guess is the right term. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what it is that I do when I'm not doing junk journals, which I don't do junk journals a lot. I mean, obviously I do them some, but this video is going to actually be about my bookmaking business. And I thought while I just worked on getting books ready to go out for sale, I would just chat with you about what it is that happens in this process, at least for me. I don't know about other people. I have, I guess I'll start by saying, taken some online courses on how to make books. I have taken classes on some very rudimentary bookmaking and some very traditional bookmaking. I've done a class on restoring old books. That one makes me very nervous. I've done very little of it. In practicing, I've just taken books, like paperback books that I have, and I have read 100 or more times over the years. And you know how paperback books just start kind of coming apart. So I've done a little bit of that, but would I want to take the 200-year-old Welsh Bible and do something with that? No. No, that's for experts. That's for someone who has a lot of practice and maybe isn't emotionally attached to things. Sometimes that's the key. So today what I'm going to do is kind of move through the processes of taking raw, I'm going to call them raw, obviously they're processed materials, but I am repurposing them and making the base of the book, I guess you could say, the outline of the book, the skeleton of the book. And then there's the covering it with paper and fabric. Most of my books are covered with fabrics. There's so many cool fabrics, and it just has this really cool feel. Different fabrics have different textures, and so that is what I mostly do. I do some books covered in paper, but it's rare for me to do that. And then of course from there you're going to take that book, these are empty and waiting for their pages to be sewn in, and then you end up with a book that, in this case, this journal has 5 signatures, although it started its life off with 3. You can see that easiest here, where I had 3 signatures. And then, as this is the book, this is the first book I made. So this was made in, oh gosh, I think maybe February of 23. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And I started off using it as a journal, talking about what I've learned and where I got ideas and what I did and how I came up with prices on paper and glue and fabric and all that sort of thing. So there's one signature in here is of that sort of diary journal type thing. And then the rest of this is inventory on the books that I've made. So let me move to the back. Originally, when I first made this book, this journaling part was the first section. But when I realized that I was running out of space and I needed to add more space, I did a couple of things. First of all, I took the threads all out and I removed the signatures from the book. And then I reordered them. So what had been the second signature became the first, and it has books number 1 through 47 in it. And then the next one was third, now it's second, and it has 48 through 95. And when I went back and did this, I went ahead and put signature covers on that were closable so that my personal private business accounting when you open the book wasn't just flash in your eye. And then so I added 2 more to this, and now I am working towards my 200th book is I'm working towards it. And so as I'm playing with these things, I guess playing with these things means making a book. As I make a journal, a blank book, then it gets written in on an inventory, and then a description of what fabric, what kind of paper, how many plies did the book have, what kind of inner papers did I put on the front and the back, things like that, right? So it doesn't matter really what you use a journal for. They're made to be used. I guess that's probably one of the things that I want to start with. And whether you're drawing or writing or diarying or gluing in pictures or ephemera from fun trips that you took, like a scrapbook, a memory book, an art journal, a creative journal, a junk journal, a book to write your stories in, a book to keep track of your quilting projects, or whatever it is that you keep track of. I do make, so these are the two that I have out here, 2 sizes I have out, are the large, which for me is a 9 by 5 3/4, and the medium, which is a 7 by 5 1/4. And then I do make a smaller journal. It's not a lot smaller than the medium, but it is, noticeably small. I don't happen to have one here right now. And that one is a 5 by 4. The small ones, while I state they're 5 by 4, and that's what I cut some of my stuff to, I found that my small ones are a little shorter than that, a little wider than that, a little taller than that. And they really do come in lots of sizes. So the 2 sizes that I really have that are consistent within, a half an inch one way or the other, depending on the board that I'm using, are the large and the medium. The smalls are usually made out of scraps and remnants, my leftovers that I just don't want to throw away. Let me move these aside. And then, for instance, this is not the size of a small one. This is what I call a tiny book. And in this case, let me do a quick measure. We're looking at 4.5 high and 4 3/4 wide. Or, something in that range. So I have a bunch of mini books. Quite honestly, I think this size of a book is great for logs. Whether you're logging in mileage for work, oil changes, and things like that for your car, your tire pressures. So a log like that. It could be a log for how many miles or kilometers you ride your bike or you run. It can be any kind of a thing like that. And the nice thing about this size of a book or a journal or a log, whatever term you want to use, is that it's small enough that it can tuck into the pocket of a purse or a backpack. It can go into your car. It can be tucked into a bike bag. It can be put into your briefcase for work if you need to log in hours, things like that. So, I think the smaller books work well for that, although I think they work well for musings and grocery lists as well. And as a person who, in my youth and childhood and young adulthood and old adulthood, has always doodled, little books like that are great because you can write in them, you can draw in them, you can do whatever you want because it's yours. Okay, so now let's talk about what I put in, how I make my book board, because I do not buy book board. I make book board. And I do that by using usually Fabrifix I find that Fabri-Tac is not, well, honestly, I don't know if it's not as good on junk journals, but I have owned my own dance studio and done costuming for 40 years. And I used Fabri-Tac. Fabri-Tac is what Hancock sold for years. And I used it and never been happy. When I found the Fabrifix, I can tell you right now that I was, not personally, but I was recommended by Pam at the Paper Outpost, who has, oh my gosh, such dynamic videos. And that's where I first saw information about making journals. And she was talking about journals generically. And she talked about how you could write in them, or you could make junk journals, or you could draw in them. You could do whatever you wanted. And I was like, I don't care what people do with them. I just want to make books. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So she uses, well, she still does, but she was using Fabrifix. And I was like, I'll order it and try it. And I like it. I like it for the fabric. I like it for the trims that I put on. So that's that. I use masking tape to put this, the front and the back covers, and attach them to the spine. And I'm not worried about using something stronger than masking tape, for the simple reason that the masking tape is simply holding it all in place until I can get the fabric cover on. And I, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I use fabric almost all of the time, but I always use fabric on the inside of the spine. So when we're looking at a book, let me go back and grab one that we were just looking at. So in this case, this was just fun bits and pieces of Hogwarts and some of the Harry Potter world. And then this dragon piece was just a nice piece of fabric from a dragon book. The background of this was just a swirl of space and stars and what have you. So I used the space and stars and swirls as the inner spine cover. I always use fabric for that, even in books that I've made with paper, because fabric will take a lot longer to disintegrate. And I'm hoping that if you buy a book or a journal from me, that it is still going to be a viable, usable thing 50 or 60 years from now. And so that requires the spine to have a really strong covering. So I use fabric on the insides. So this particular stack is just some plain chipboard that has been cut to make a medium-sized journal. So it is cut at the 5 1/4. This one is actually a little tall. It's 7.5 inches high. So it'll be a little bit taller than the other medium books. And that just speaks volumes of our individuality as people and books and silliness. Okay, so I use things like packaging from food and from, in this case, vintage ephemera. And let's see what this is. Oh, the same thing. So when I get boxes, cake mix boxes are the perfect size, actually, for medium journals. To go for large journals, then I have to go with obviously bigger boxes like, oh, I'm out of focus. Let's fix that. There we go. Cereal boxes or large family-sized cracker boxes, things like that. But in addition to packaging from items that I've purchased, I also get from a couple of different neighbors and friends, I get packaging that I think are like separators from, I don't know, case lots maybe. I know, lots of ums today. I know that my one friend was for a long time buying cat food by the case for a cat who had special dietary needs, and she would bring me the separators for those, and I have a lot of them and I use them. They're the perfect size for the medium journals also, so it's easy to make medium journals. It's easy to find board for that, but the large is a little harder. And so I am always happy when people bring over big stuff. Plus, it's just not going into the landfill. And yes, people recycle, but as we know, not everybody recycles. That's your choice, that's you're the one that has to live with yourself. That's fine. But the bad thing is seemingly how often things get recycled and then the recycling companies throw them away. Now, we can't control that, but we can control how much we put into the landfill. So what I'm doing right now is I have 3 layers of this board, and I am measuring it out at 9 inches, and I'm cutting it. It is a kind of slick board, and because I didn't want them sliding apart and making my cuts crooked, that's why I put the clip on. So I start off, and there's 4 of them. Oh, that's okay, I guess. I start off by cutting my boards down from whatever their original size is. Okay, really? To the size I need. I always start with big books. I always start with board for my large size books. And then anything that's left over, I can use for the smalls or the mediums. In this case, what I can get out of this size of board is I've cut one section at 9 inches because that's my height. Now I'm cutting the second section, what was left over, down to the 9, and that's actually going to leave me pieces that seem to want to be crooked, that are going to be 3/4 of an inch, and 3/4 of an inch just happens to be the size that I prefer for spines for standard journals that you would write in, whatever it is that you're going to write in. For art journals, I like to use 1 inch. No, this is going to come up 1 inch once I got it straightened out nicely. So that's fine. I can use inches as well. So in a 3/4 inch spine, I like to put in 3 signatures. And in a 1 inch spine, I like to put in 4 signatures. Now, this is not for junk journaling. That would be too many pages and not wide enough of a spine. And then by the time you even just put a few things in a journal that size on your pages, you would already have something resembling a gator mouth, and you would have next to nothing in it. So if I'm making a junk journal, i.e., if I'm making a journal or a book, a blank book, specifically for junk journaling, then I make a little more space. I would put 3. Okay, was that it? No. I would put 3 signatures in a 1 inch, or maybe even in a 1 1/4, because I would want there to be plenty of room for the ephemera being put in. Let's just get rid of this clip and move some of these things, how they've been cut through. So this is just what I do. This is kind of what I've watched other people talk about in the early stages of all of this. It's what I heard people say, oh, this is a thought, this is a recommendation, and I took it all and made notes and then took some online courses and online, through YouTube. There's several creators that teach classes. You just go in and sign up for them and pay for them. And okay, I can't cut all 8 of these at once. So now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cut it to the 5 3/4. So I realize that you can't really see what's happening down here in this corner, but down here in this corner on this self-healing rotary cutting mat is the 0 going up to 17 that way, and then the 0 going down to 23 going that way. And my camera doesn't really show into this corner well. So what I've done here now is I've gotten it into the corners, and I'm going to cut it at the 5 7/8 mark. And because I really like to put my straight edge on the inch lines, and this is an older mat that doesn't have mid markings, I move it down 1/4 inch. Okay, so it's now off of the 0 on this line 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to count that 3/4 left, and then 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and it seems wrong, but I'm actually going to cut it on the 8-inch mark, because that gives me 7 3/4. It's not really math, it's perspective. I don't know, it's math. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do the math, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. I either need to clip it again so that they don't slip and slide, which I think is what I'll do. Okay, there we go. Back into it, off of the line by 1/4 inch. Okay, so again, 7 3/4. This is just wrong. It shouldn't be that wide. Okay, think about this. It's 5 3/4. Oh yeah, sometimes something that I was thinking I was cutting for large becomes a small, or something else. So we have 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so we're moving over to 6. I'm looking at this thinking, I should get 2 cuts out of this, and I'm not going to. So a little distraction, but that's okay, because I figured it out before I made the cut. Because even though this is being repurposed and reused, I still hate it when I make a mistake and I have to throw stuff away. Like I said, a lot of times I can just, repurpose it for something smaller, for instance, but, it's really frustrating when you go through everything and then you're like, that didn't work. I didn't count right, or I didn't eyeball it, or what was I thinking? Okay, so now that's there. Evening up on this line. Again, I realize that you're not getting a good view of this at all. But I also know that it's a pretty mundane thing. So this is not meant to be a tutorial. It's just not. This, however, is kind of the beginnings of making your book. Pam at the Paper Outpost and Nick the Booksmith have great videos in detail on how to make a book from scratch. And at some point I may go ahead and make one up, but at this point I don't have any plans of making anything in the next month or two, so that's probably not going to happen. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, through trial and error, I have learned that using this weight chipboard, whether it's got the finish or it's got the not, you know, the no finish on it like this does. Sometimes it has finish on one side and not another. For the large, I like 4-ply. I find that if it has 4-ply in the front and back cover, it's going to be good and stable. And so now we have, I can move that into where you can see that. So now we have the process of gluing these pieces together. It's hard to tell what it is that takes the longest. What, you know, you're like, oh, the cutting. You're like, oh, the gluing. And then you're like, oh. So it's just a process, and it helps not to fixate or focus on this. And when I first started, it would take me a whole day to make a book. And, you know, from the start to finish, if I was going to start and I was going to end up getting the signatures all sewn in, it would take me all day. And obviously, like anything else, the more you practice your craft, the more you play with your papers, the more efficient you become. So we can say faster. And I don't know. I don't know that I'm any faster putting glue on than I was 2 years ago. But I am more efficient at it. And that is what is going to help you in whatever endeavor you're doing, whatever endeavor you're doing. If you want to become competent, and then good, and then professional. I don't know. I don't suppose you have to go in that order, but I suspect that's the order. That's it. That's what I'm going to tell you the order is. And then from here, let's see, we're at just over 27 minutes. And my camera likes it when oh, that guy's a little small. Well, luckily he's going to be tucked inside. There's a lot of forgiveness in this job. Not with that particular piece. So I guess maybe as a rule I should not be cutting these 4 at a time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This has a very crooked cut on it. We'll fix that once it is dried. So the little imperfections are not a big deal. Like where I get glue, because this is going to end up being covered. Okay, let's do this one. So this last week or so, I have been pushing myself. I sell these journals and these junk journals and blank books. I sell them at craft shows. I have mentioned I have a dance studio, so I actually do have a little corner table where I sell these at my dance studio. And I'm in Tucson. I use is the right word. I sell my journals at a place called Saguaro Square, which is a crafters. I think they call it a mall. And I was like, oh, that's kind of clever. So they opened up a business. The folks at Saguaro Square opened up a business last year in 2024, and they consign shelving space out. And so I started selling my books there. And it wasn't brand new when I started. I probably got in on around the 5th month. And this was that kind of crooked cut for whatever reason. I had a crooked cut. I'm just going to even it up. whatever reasons, because I'm talking to you and not necessarily counting properly, as we saw a minute ago. So anyway, I started selling in November, and I thought, well, we'll see what it looks like during the holidays. And it's pretty much a month by month. When you first sign up, you're signing up for 3 months. And then after that, it's a month-to-month basis. And so I thought, well, I'll be able to see how well sales go in January. So I was there November, December, and January. And I thought, you can really expect not to have much in the way of sales in January because people have bought things during, the Christmas holidays. And their budget has been kind of maxed out. So I'm like, well, I'll stay March and April. We'll see how it goes. And I can say that there's not been landslide months. That hasn't happened. There's been a couple of months where I didn't make enough money to pay my rent. It's rent. It's a little rent on a space. And I have noticed that as, say, March hits, I'll do a quick measure here. Okay. As March hits, I can see that a fair amount of people pulled their stock out. They quit using the service. And, all right, where are we? And I thought, I may be throwing good money after bad, although I don't believe that at all. I really don't. But I haven't made wondrous sales, but I've made sales. And as I said, the business isn't super, it's not well established. And yet, whenever I go in, there's shoppers. Sometimes the place is rather packed, and I'm going in to kind of clean up my shelf or add books or change out books. And, you're kind of like, oh, excuse me. And so, I'm like, I see possibility. I think this is an interesting concept. I know it's been done before, and I hope it works here. I hope it works for them as well as I hope it works for me. It's not all about me. So I went ahead and I doubled my shelf space. The beginning of June, I committed to another small shelf, and I am comfortable putting 9 books. I can fit 10 books in the shelf, but then I feel like it's a little bit squashed. And so I put 9 books on a shelf. And so I went ahead and committed for another shelf, which means that not only do I need to replace what's been sold the last month or two, I sold a couple of books through Sorrel Square last month. I have sold, it was a custom-made junk journal, so it wasn't a surprise. I got that custom-made junk journal done. That was the fairies. If you haven't seen it, you should go in and check it out. I have a series, like a playlist, that's the word I want, on getting that one made up, and my customer was like ecstatic, which is fun. But now it's like, well, you're gonna have to ramp it up a little bit, and I am getting ready for fall fairs, craft fairs. So I have been upping the book making, but this month I had to make sure that I was upping by at least, another 9 or 10. Okay. So these 2 are done. I don't know how much time I have. I don't want this to go into 2 videos, like my machine to cut it and do that. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to stop here. And then I'm going to go ahead and probably film a couple more, and I'll just release them one a day for the next week, and just taking you through the process. Again, like I said, this is not a teaching tutorial, but it does give you ideas and kind of lets you know how your book is being made. If you buy a Bookworm Bindery book, then some of them, some of the junk journals specifically, have actually been detailed on the website, or not on the website, I'm sorry, on YouTube. You can get to those through my website as well. It's kind of where my brain, I think, was. So this is the first part. In the next video, I will make the spine and get it all taped together and maybe get it covered with fabric. I have fabric sitting here waiting to go. So thanks for sticking around if you're still here. Please hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video or you find it interesting. And then maybe subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notifications of this kind of content from me and others that do similar content. Okay, have fun with your papers or your project. Thanks.